So it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar being hosted jointly by the Women's Task Force on behalf of the Parliament of the World's Religions to introduce ourselves to you, to give you an opportunity to get a glimpse into all the hard work that we've been engaged in for well over a year now in creating women's programming at the upcoming Parliament in Chicago in August. To which I hope we will be welcoming you all in person. We wanted to give you some background on women at the Parliament, an introduction to some of our programming, the planning, what it takes to pull something like this together, and hopefully to excite you so that you will join us, because without you, there's no purpose to what we do. We do this to gather the women. And when the women gather, things change. And if ever the world needed women together, this is the moment. So we welcome you today. We will welcome you in August. Miriam, do you want to give a quick oversight of how we'll proceed today so folks know what to expect? And then we'll plunge in and I'll do a little prayer and we'll get going.
Yeah, awesome. So welcome everyone. Happy International Women's Day. So we're going to start with, as Phyllis said, an opening prayer. We then have the different members of our Women's Task Force giving a brief synopsis of kind of the history of the women at the Parliament. We have someone speaking on what it's like to actually attend and plan one of the convenings. We'll talk about our current programs for this year's convenings and our exciting Women's Village. We'll also give some tips on how to engage your community for attendance and fundraising. We'll also talk about youth involvement and, what the role of next generation in youth is at the Parliament. We will answer questions at the end, and then we'll, give a brief run through of what we plan to talk about in May's webinar and, look to the future. Real quick, I realized I just wanted to introduce everyone who's on our Women's Task Force, just so our participants know. So we have Phyllis, who is the program chair for this year's convening. She's also one of America's first public Wiccan priestesses, as well as an attorney and an author. So thank you, Phyllis. We then have Kekishan, who is also the chair of our Next Generation Task Force. She's a youth leader, global influencer on the Forbes 30 Under 30, climate realty mentor, author, musician, and just a passionate advocate for women's rights. So thank you, Kekishan. We have Dolly, who was the vice chair of our board of trustees at the Parliament of the World's Religions from 2020 to 2021. She was the president of the Federation of the Zoroastrian Associations of North America and the co-chair of the World Zoroastrian Congress. We have Anne, who is the co-founder and convener of our Green Tent Circle, the co-convener of Millionth Circle, and she's obviously, as everyone here, part of our Women's Task Force at the Parliament. We have Pat, who has authored 4 books. She has an active psychotherapy practice as well for over 30 years. We have Sandy, who is an award-winning leader in fields of women's empowerment and interfaith community building. And hopefully I got everyone and just wanted to keep it brief and say thank you and welcome. And sorry I didn't do that in the beginning.
So thank you all. Thank you, Miriam. Miriam is our essential staff, and we're very grateful to have her and her predecessor, also Miriam. So take a moment on International Women's Day. Very important, as we exchanged emails in anticipation of this webinar this morning, everybody agreed how essential it was for us to acknowledge and honor and make clear our support for the women of Iran, the first women to lead a revolution for the dignity, the democracy, the human rights of women, and for all people of Iran. And we are deeply grateful to their courage and their activism. And they will be present, they'll be represented, we anticipate, in addressing the plenaries of the Parliament and in participating in the Women's Assembly and in panels that are specifically devoted to their courage and their activism. So in looking for prayer to open today, I found two that come from that part of the world, that are part of our European indigenous wisdom traditions, and that speak to the magic and the divine feminine, women's power. And so this is the day when dawn receives our saffron cakes in her sacred temple. This is the day which honors the bond between sisters and the freedom of all women. This is the day when there is no slavery at the threshold of the temple. Today, all women are joined in the joys of sisterhood, of motherhood, for we hold up not our own, but our sisters' children to the sun. So thank you all. So a very brief history. I could talk about the history of the Parliament for multiple hours, and I will not do that. In 1893, the first Parliament took place, and it was part of the big Chicago exposition. And it was historic for many reasons. It was the first convening, really the first interfaith convening, and it gave birth to the interfaith movement. It was the mother of the interfaith movement. And as we celebrate Women's History Month during the month of March, we have to acknowledge and celebrate the women who were present in 1893. There were 19 women who spoke. And that was really remarkable because it was not typical in 1893 for women to be speaking on public stages. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was one of those women, and she's very well known, but there were 4 key figures whose names I want to speak because they were groundbreaking women. There was Miss Marian Murdoch, who spoke about a New Testament woman, what that meant. Reverend Mrs. Annis F. Eastman, and she spoke on the influence of women in religion. Miss Henrietta Sold spoke about what Judaism has done for women. And Dr. In 1893, Dr. Eliza Sunderland gave an address called The Importance of the Study of Comparative Religion, which was radical to be delivered by a woman and radical to be discussed at that time. And you can read more about the impact of women at the 1893 convention. There was a really wonderful work and a number of presentations at past parliaments given by Reverend Alison Stokes, who's the founding director of the Women's Interfaith Institute of the Finger Lakes. And she has an article called The Founding Females of Interreligious Leadership, Scholarship, and Service. And I think you can access that through the Parliament's website. So there were contradictions in 1893. They were called the Board of Lady Managers, and they refused to exhibit Black women's accomplishments on their own. They presented them at the Women's Building, which was an achievement. It was designed by 2 women, but the contributions were amalgamated into something with a tragic title called Women's Work in Savagery that depicted Black women, Native American women, Pacific women. And we've come a very long way since then. In 2009, there was a remarkable convening panel devoted to the divine feminine from an interfaith perspective that I was honored to participate in Melbourne, Australia. And they put us in a room for 500, and there were so many people, it poured out into the hall. And it reflected the fact that on the average, more than 60%, usually close to 70% of the participants at any given parliament are in fact women. And there've always been women on the board. There have been vice chairs. There was in fact a chair who was a woman after the 2018, right? During and shortly after the 2018 convening in Toronto. We have had Mary Nelson has served as executive director.
Meeting is being recorded.
Of the Parliament, and we've always had a presence on the board. But it wasn't until 2014 when, as a board member with other women, it was quite obvious that we needed a women's task force. We needed women's programming. We needed a stronger articulation of the interests and the needs of women. And so we created a women's task force. And out of that, in 2015, with the help of Miriam, primarily on my shoulders, we organized the inaugural Women's Assembly, which was historic. There were over 4,000 women there the day before the Parliament began. We had a women's plenary the next day, the first full day of the Parliament, and we have had a Women's Assembly ever since, and there will be a Women's Assembly this year, and there is a women's track of programming, which you will now hear much about. Part of the work of the Women's Task Force is to create the programming, not just for the Parliament, but the interim programming, which is, you'll hear also a little bit more about. We're going to have another webinar in May. The creation of the Declaration for the Dignity and Human Rights of Women, which was unanimously approved at the 2015 Parliament, which is a foundational document and remarkable. And we hope will have increasing influence because for really the first time, the interfaith movement collectively said that religions cannot be used to justify discrimination against women. You cannot justify gender apartheid on religious grounds. It changed the moral compass. And we hope that that will be of support to our sisters around the world as they fight for their dignity and for their human rights. We have issued a number of letters last year, in response to the Dobbs decision in the United States, and also in support of our Iranian sisters. And we hope that this convening will be a source of inspiration for women as they share best practices, as they offer the wisdom that their various spiritual traditions provide them, the strength, the insight, the courage to step forward in times of crisis, and a global crisis that we're all facing now, which is the theme of our Parliament, the call to conscience, defending the dignity, the human rights that is threatened by the ascension of fascism around the world. And of course, that is an issue where, as my father said to me as a little girl, you can always judge the status of democracy, of freedom and human rights in any culture by the status of its women. We are the canary, the beautiful golden canary in the gold mine of human civilizations. And so the threat to the dignity and human rights of one is always felt first by women, and it is women who will speak to that issue. And so we hope that you will join us. And thank you, and I am done.
Good afternoon, one and all, and a very happy International Women's Day to women and men who are joining us today. My name is Dolly Dastor, and as Miriam introduced me, I'm on the board of the Trust on the Parliament of World Religions. Yes, today we also welcome men and women, as we need men to work together to defend the freedom and human rights, which is a call to conscience for all. The International Women's Day was started in 1911 and remains an important movement for working to advance women's equality with a day belonging to everyone and everywhere. Groups can choose to mark the day in whatever manner they deem most fit. To quote Seema Bahu's Executive Director of the UN Women, on International Women's Day, we celebrate the power and potential of women and girls. We recognize their courage, their resilience, and leadership. We mark the ways in which we're making progress towards a more gender equal world. Marked annually on March the 8th, the International Women's Day is one of the most important days of the year. Everyone, everywhere can play a part in helping forge gender equality, from a wide range of the campaigns, events, rallies, lobbying, and performances to festivals, parties, fun runs, and celebrations. All International Women's Day activity is valid. That's what makes the International Women's Day inclusive. This year's theme, Embrace Equity, recognizes that everyone has different circumstances and seeks to help forge worldwide conversation about the importance of supporting equity so that we can achieve equality. On this International Women's Day, we salute all trailblazing women all over the world who lead by example and make important and lasting changes, like the women of Iran and Afghanistan, as the gains we have made over the decades are being threatened. Hence, the theme of the Parliament, convening, is a very appropriate theme. We are living in a very fundamental human rights for all, especially of women, are being chipped away slowly, ever so slowly that before we realize, we maybe even lose the right to vote, which we gained after our suffragette efforts. The right to vote was granted in 1919 in US and in 1916 in Manitoba, Canada. And in 1922, all the provinces in Canada had the right to vote. Till then, women were not considered as persons. They were the property of their fathers or husbands, without whose permission they could not even open a bank account or buy property. However, we need to acknowledge that women carry the responsibilities in preserving and protecting our cultures for the next 7 generations. Women have made much progress since then, but much remains to be done. In some countries, what you wear is controlled, your education is controlled, your body is controlled, and you're forced to carry through an unwanted pregnancy, either through rape or from an abusive relationship, or carry a deformed fetus. Your freedom of movement is controlled. You cannot travel alone without a male family escort. Maybe you have wondered, as I did when I first joined the Parliament as a trustee in 2016, what is a parliament? The Middle English definition is a discourse, conversation, conference, assembly, assembly of the lay and ecclesiastical aristocracy. It is a word borrowed from Anglo-French, from parler, to speak, and means a meeting of 2 or more people. The Parliament was created to cultivate harmony among the world's religions and spiritual communities and foster their engagement with the world and its guiding institutions in order to achieve a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. Now, 1893, as Phyllis mentioned, marked the first formal gathering of representatives of the Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. It was here that the Indian Vedic monk Swami Vivekananda brought the Eastern religions to the attention of the West. Today, the 1893 Parliament is recognized as the birthplace of the worldwide interfaith movement. The next Parliament was held in 1993 at Chicago after a period of 100 years, then in Cape Town, South Africa in 1999, in Barcelona, Spain in 2004, Melbourne, Australia in 2009, Salt Lake City, USA in 2015, Toronto, Canada in 2018, a virtual convening in 2021, and now in Chicago again, the birthplace of the Parliament in 2023. Before the arrival of COVID, all the convenings were in person, and they attracted between 8,000 to 10,000 attendees, always a mammoth undertaking. Each Parliament is different, uniquely shaped by the city which hosts it and the participants who add their voices to the convening theme, but at the heart of all are people who are committed to interfaith dialogue, religious freedom, climate action, global ethics, peace and justice, empowering the voices of the next generation, women and girls and indigenous peoples. And the daunting task of the organizing committee is to bring together gender balanced, historically diverse and international roster of plenary speakers and performers to the inspiring voices of the Parliament of World Religions. Some of the inspiring voices in the past parliaments have been His Holiness the Dalai Lama, President Nelson Mandela, Dr. Jane Goodall, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Margaret Atwood, and many others. Since its inception, the Parliament has developed a practical and constructive framework that guides its actions, promoting interfaith harmony rather than unity, fostering convergence rather than consensus, worked based on facilitation rather than formal organizational structures. In the Parliament, there are no 2 sides of the aisle, no gerrymandering, no stonewalling, no filibusters, just plain interfaith dialogue. You will see for yourself when you attend. You may also ask, why should I attend the parliament? What is in there for me? And I will tell you what is in there for you. It is being inspired by interaction with participants from all over the world, remarkable keynote speakers who are bridge builders between the spiritual and social justice, learning of programs developed by grassroots people across the world and applying them to our situation. The 2023 Chicago Parliament promises to be a life-changing experience with vibrant 5 jam-packed days of interfaith programming, dialogue, and inspiration, with an organized parade of faiths and a sacred music concert open to the public in the park. Once you attend one parliament, you will be hooked and want to attend each subsequent one like me, to be inspired and network, wanting to make the world a better place, one step at a time. It motivates you to move prayer to action. As one blogger wrote, one conference won't change the world, but it can spread hope, and that is what we need. Organizing such a mammoth gathering requires teamwork and collaboration and strong partnerships for designing, planning, preparing, and implementing all programmatic aspects, such as selecting speakers, scheduling programs and events, designing and publishing the program book, responsible for registration, management, insurance, marketing, the website, all AV and all the line facilities. And most important, fundraising, as all this requires money with a capital M, an estimate $4 million US. The projected cost is largely funded by various levels of government, community-sponsored, donors, and through registration fees paid by the attendees. That is why we need you to come to join us in Chicago, August 14th to the 18th, 2023, at the McCormick Place. At the end of the 4 days, you will be transformed into a multi-sectoral ambassadors of peace, justice, and sustainability worldwide. I hope I have inspired you to come to join us in August. Thank you for your time and celebrate the rest of the International Women's Day. You deserve it for all you do the year round. Thank you. And now on to the next speaker.
But what I was feeling as I was beginning to talk, was overwhelmed with the shoulders that we stand on. It's breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. And, it brought tears to my eyes. What has come before? So it's really interesting to me because Sandy and my vision of the Parliament, included in it is fun and hospitality and welcoming. And so what it feels like to me is that with all of this beautiful anticipation and coming to the Parliament, we will have the Women's Village that will welcome any women and men who want to come together and connect with, who knows, randomly in our Women's Village. And the way that the Women's Village came to be is that 2015 Parliament was this huge opening for women's voices, led by Phyllis and participated in by so many people. So I just lost my thought for a second. So what we were thinking as we were on the Women's Task Force was really doing an up-leveling of that energy. And so that's where Sandy and I have been focused. And what we've been doing has been fun and creative and the most extraordinary energy. At the very beginning of our work on the task force, because there was so much work to do, we divided into subcommittees. And so Sandy and I have been working in this particular subcommittee, and then included in this subcommittee are some extraordinary women who are our team. And I would like to name all of them. That's part of my tech problem. So we'll see what happens, Sandy. So we have Sharon Ganji and Karen Breller, I'm not sure. Bressler, Katie Hoffman, and Brescia, I got her middle name and not her last name, and Dale Allen. These are women that have been, and Anita Shankar.
And Marcy Beck.
I'll tell you about Marcy.
Another time. But yeah, so we have a great dynamic power pack team. We're having
incredible. So we are having a wonderful time creating the most welcoming space for anyone who comes to the Parliament, and of course, in particular, honoring women's voices and women's creativity and women's connection. So that might be enough of a little bit of introduction for then Sandy to show the deck.
And this is how we plan on up-leveling the energy that Phyllis has planted from past parliaments. This is, we imagine what is possible, what could be next for this parliament to elevate that. So here we go. Here you are, Pat, go right ahead.
Okay, so imagine a women's village in 2023 convening at the Parliament. So imagine a women's village which provides space for spontaneous and intentional connection, inspiration, regeneration, shared stories, meaningful activation, creative engagement, problem solving, creative activities, activism, and subtle activism. And any of us who have gone to any kinds of conferences or retreats, we know that those side conversations are so often the juiciest. You know, we go to the workshops, we come back and we go, oh my God, I just went to this workshop and I'm all excited about this. And we make these the kind of magic connections that frankly women are extremely good at. So then continue as we go through a little bit of a description. Imagine a container that is sacred space for women of all faiths. Right. This will be part of our village.
And this is where we are going to invite you to a high level understanding and vision of what we have. Because you don't see it here does not mean that it's not going to be there. We're in the process of developing it now. So you're just going to have to come to the Parliament to truly experience it. But here's what we plan. So imagine that container that is a sacred space for all women of all faiths in the halls of the Parliament of the World's Religion, in this, typically binary environment of the Parliament of the World's Religions. Imagine a space where dialogue can thrive amongst women, in particular, in a special manner. Imagine where women can flow together and dance together in a sacred space. Imagine a space that's held for sacred ceremony and engaging our natural world. Imagine a space, a room, if you will, for healing and regeneration and connection in a somatic way, in a way that's unique to the female body and the divine feminine. Imagine a sacred space, a womb space, as the red tent. It brings us into that, our own divinity. Imagine a room where all attendees can experience the feminine design of a women's village. And as Pat said early on, that this is for women and men to be able to come into our village. And while there will be certain occasions, including certain programming in the red tent, for example, that are for women only to be in that safe, sacred space, we certainly are in partnership with our with men and those who do not identify as well to come in and participate in a various programming. Imagine a space that honors Indigenous grandmothers and crown wisdom, where you can come and sit at the hem of these wise ones and hear them in a sacred space. Imagine a space for creative engagement. And this is all we're going to say about this, but we're just going to invite you to hold tight, because this dynamic team that Pat mentioned, we're having so much fun creating really dynamic engagement pieces, activities, ways that you can connect intentionally and spontaneously, arts and crafts and real fun things to actually get your hands into, and because your voice, your creativity, your fingerprint is the only thing that we cannot develop here, but we are inviting you and asking you to come and please bring it. It's critical to us that you are there. That's the only thing that we can't plan for, that only you can bring. We're creating a space for that. Imagine a space surrounded by women's woven voices from around the world, creating walls with actual voices of women, and different ways and dynamic ways to engage through the arts. And the world-renowned Lydia Rule goddess banners holding sacred space and inspiration. Yeah, we're creating a womb space and a birth canal with these gorgeous banners that are more than art. They are living, being inspirations. And I'm getting full body. That's all I'm going to say about that. Perhaps you are too. I invite you all to check into your body right now and ask how you're feeling about this sacred space. Imagine a women's marketplace of products by and for women to support women in that way. And I'm going to leave us all, because we have limited time, with a quote from our own Patricia Farrow. This is the moment to respond to her invitation to rise up, unite, and enact in every possible way based on our gifts, interest, and ordained contributions. I ultimately leave you with imagining what is possible when women converge in the sacred space of the Women's Village at the Parliament of the World's Religions. Please come, please contribute. Thank you, Dolly, for reminding us that we contribute with more than our fingerprints and our wisdom and our intention and our integrity and our agency, but with our dollars, and that's necessary to build this village. So I thank you, and therein lies our vision of the Women's Village at the Parliament.
Okay, if we're not excited yet, I don't know. There is so much that is going to be happening, and there are many, many workshops and panels that are by and for women. And I want to just talk to you about how I am getting the word out as maybe something that will inspire you to how to get the word out. I am the past Women's Ministries Director for the National Episcopal Church, so I have great connections into the Episcopal Church. And I've asked the president of 2 national women's organizations in the Episcopal Church that I can write articles, I can do blogs, I can do all the campaigning they'll allow me to do, which is really exciting. So I'm working with Miriam and being able to craft a letter that will go out that will personalize it to them. And then for me, and if you want, and I'm going to put my email in the chat, if you would like to have a template or some help with this, because it is that personal connections and being able to say, this is why you want to come, this is why you want to come to the Parliament. I'm so excited, and I've been to many parliaments, so I'm going to go from my experience of being in a parliament, I'm going to go saying, and for the Episcopal women, I'm going to say, and we will meet. We'll find a way to meet before, during, and after. And Million Circle is here. Gather the women I'm working with also. And then secular organizations with the, it's called We Can, which is the Women's Earth and Climate Action. So we're talking about spiritual, religious, and secular. You all are connected somehow to some women's organizations or just an organization. Like the Conservancy, the Conservancy all have chapters. And so you could write to the Nature Conservancy of saying, this is why you need to be there. I will be there, I'll meet you. I'll meet you in the green tent, and we're going to talk about all kinds of actions that you can take locally. And there is a climate action village too, where we can meet. And then the thing that Sisters Fund is another one. So you can just think about organizations that you are connected to. And in the letter, I'm going to personalize for each one. I'm also going to add this incredible video, the video that has the Parliament in action. And then I can also put this recording so they can hear it again if they want to, if that's going to be appropriate. And then, of course, we'll do a whole thing about when you register, please hit the button for donation. All donations, small and large, are needed, and they're needed for us to bring in speakers, to bring in panelists, to bring in the green tent and the red tent and the women's sacred space and the women's village. We have so much to offer, and of course, all of it takes money. So being able to do that, every donation will count. So I'm going to put that in my letter because of all the newsletters that I'm going to be working with and blogs and et cetera, of course, are electronic, so they can just click on and they will get that wonderful video that shows and I'll put that link in, the wonderful video that shows the Parliament in action and also our donation button. So those are the things that I will be doing, and I'll encourage you to just reach out. And even if you don't know much about the Parliament, saying, I am going to go to the Parliament because I am hearing all these wonderful things. Here's a video you could look at, or here's a website, go onto the website. And just it's that person to person. And I see that we have about 50 people today. Imagine if 50 people, total 10. Or you write to a newsletter that's going to cover for the national groups that I'm writing to, have hundreds and hundreds. So come to the Parliament, but before that, tell people, everyone that you know, come to the Parliament. I'll meet you there. We'll have a fabulous time. And what I love about the Parliament is it's the way of connecting. I get new resources, I get new energy, I get new inspiration, and I get new colleagues. People who are helping me to carry on the work that I believe in. And you're not doing it alone, because so often we feel like we're just alone, and we're not. When we're at the Parliament, we're with thousands, and then we have more thousands. And for me, it's like going to the well, and it's being refreshed. And then I can go out and do the work, but I will now have many, many other connections. So that's my commercial, and I'll put it in. And if you want sort of the template for the letter I'm going to write, just email me and I'll send it to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. I can go ahead now. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to meet all of you. First of all, happy International Women's Day. I'm really excited to actually be on this space, on International Women's Day, sharing this virtual space with all of you. As Miriam had originally mentioned, my name is Kehkasha. I am the youngest trustee of the Parliament, member of the Women's Task Force, chair of the Next Gen Task Force, and I'm also the founder president of Green Hope Foundation. Now, with young people, we are frequently viewed as a homogenous entity. And as young women, we often have to choose between identifying as a young person or identifying as a woman, and are also often discriminated against for either or both of our identities. But here at the Parliament, we recognize the various intersectionalities that make up a person and work to create an empowering atmosphere. And therefore, as a young woman myself, and being elected as the youngest trustee of the parliament, I've always deeply appreciated the intergenerational solidarity in our women's task force that also recognizes my identity as a young person and as a young woman, which is something I try to reflect back on the Next Gen task force as well, so that as young women, we are not restricted by our lived experiences and the facets that make up our identities, but rather we're actually liberated by them. So the 2023 Parliament's theme of defending freedom and human rights is, of course, extremely relevant to us, to all women really, but speaking from a young woman's perspective, it's very relevant for us as well. And we want to be able to ensure that the 2023 Parliament reflects the intergenerational solidarity that we see in our women's task force. And we seek to create a safe, welcoming space for passionate young women who are working to defend freedom and human rights, and welcome them to our parliament convening. And there are really so many ways to engage. My fellow members of the Women's Task Force have spoken about many of them. And yes, you can engage with the Women's Task Force, you can engage with the Next Gen Task Force, you can engage with both. But the bottom line is that intergenerational solidarity has always been a cornerstone of the feminist movement, where knowledge sharing amongst generations has been encouraged and celebrated. And we, as the women of the parliament, want to be able to continue that legacy, harnessing the wisdom of women and girls in all of our diversity across all ages. And thus, we welcome all of you to join us at the 2023 Parliament and share your unique perspectives. And we hope to see you in Chicago in a few months. And happy International Women's Day once again.
Thank you so much. All righty. So I believe we have time for a few questions, if that's okay with everyone. I know we've already had a couple people submit some questions in the Q&A section. So yeah, Sandy, are you able to answer so far the two questions I showed you?
Well, I absolutely tickled to. They're relating to the Women's Village. Thank you, Ruth Brody-Sharon, about contributing ideas to the Women's Village. I know you, and I know you have extraordinary and expansive ideas. And thank you, Lori Blackman, also for asking about becoming more involved. Absolutely. So the best way is to reach out to myself and to Pat. I'll drop, I know, Ruth, you have my email, but I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat for everybody. We are boots on the ground. Everybody, we are a task force, which means you come and you get involved, right? And so come and expect an email from me, but reach out to me and Pat, and we'll get you involved. We'll listen to your ideas. We'll take them back into Circle, according to Circle principles. Yeah, and thank you, Pat, for putting your address in there. I hope that answered your question. I mean, I just want to be broad because we could spend an entire hour on ideas for a Women's Village. Yeah.
Yeah, so far those were our two questions.
I guess we were thorough.
Yeah.
So, so Miriam, will we be able to see that extraordinary video that Dolly shared with us? Do we know?
Yeah, I mean, unless any of our other panelists have anything other to share, we can we can end, I think, on this really great video. The only other thing I want to mention is we'll send out a follow-up email to all registrants of this webinar. We will include the direct links for donations because, as we've talked about, really that's one of the biggest ways you can support us, especially as we're getting ready this year for the convening. And then we plan to meet in 2 months again, so the second Wednesday in the month of May. And so our topic, hopefully for that month, and again, that's Wednesday, May 10th, we'll be focusing on Indigenous populations and, you know, the role of women and everything like that. We haven't fine-tuned our details quite yet, but that's our hopeful topic for May 10th. So we will obviously keep everyone posted. But again, I hope everyone can check their emails, in the next day or two, and we'll be recording this webinar, and again, also be sending you the direct link to donate. We did just get a quick question about the dates of the Parliament for this year. And so it will be August 14th through 18th, that Monday through Friday in Chicago. Although if people are able to come to town on Sunday, we have some parade happening and everything. So if you can make your plans accommodate Sunday, August 13th as well, it'd be great. It gives you time to settle. Yeah. And so there's another question about a sign-up site to do shifts at the village. The Parliament offers the option to have people volunteer. There is an official form and everything that you have to complete through our website. So I'm going to quickly chat that form to all of our participants. There is a little bit of a process, nothing lengthy, but there's a couple of forms you have to go through first. And then I believe on that form, you can mention where you'd like to volunteer, what area, and please just focus on Women's Village, and we will keep you posted.
One thing I wanted to mention too, I know that there's 2 women coming who are bringing their students. And so we're really working on how these young people can connect. And of course, they will be connecting with the Gen X, and they'll be doing all of that. But just also encourage yourself to bring, if you have students, that's great, or your daughters or your granddaughters. Because, imagine being able to, at a very young age, experience something like this. You have a feminist for life. And so I just wanted to point that out, and that's the whole thing of being able to connect. We're going to connect before, we're going to connect during, and we'll stay connected, because we're going to also talk about how we can have the Parliament have a life afterwards.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, and bring your sons.
Yeah,
please bring your sons.
Absolutely.
Well. Absolutely. If you've never been to a Parliament before, there's one word that was described to me at the first Parliament I went to, which is right before Melbourne, and that is transformational. Everyone that goes to the Parliament responds to that question is, how would you describe it? Transformational. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think for the students, they're bringing both boys and girls, or men and women. So when you think students, yeah. And the thing that I like about that, this is part of their studies. So they're coming with really being able to, for whatever their issues they're working on or whatever, and then to be going back and putting it in their work as a student. So.
I want to mention also that the Parliament is not only about the women's issues. There's lots of other issues like the climate change, about the intergeneration, about justice and peace around the world. So there are many other issues also which we discuss, and we come to some sort of a dialogue between ourselves, not only the women.
Right, because there are about, what do you say, Phyllis, close to 1,000 panels and workshops a day. It'll be large. It will be very well coordinated, and that there is something for everybody. And if you had wanted to go on a certain thing about if your dream is for peace, or your dream is for working in the environment, you can do that. You'll be able to follow along with that.
If I were going to sum it up, which seems appropriate as we come to the end of our time, there is a blessing power in everyone's presence at the Parliament. We announce important speakers. We announce leaders from various faith traditions. People respond. But one of the things I've learned over these many years is that the reason that people come to the Parliament is not for this particular speaker or that particular film or program. They come for the Parliament because when you're at the Parliament, you are with other people who are proving to you your greatest faith in our humanity. We are together being who we are meant to be. you are in the world as it's supposed to be, right? That we respect each other, that we value each other, that we learn from each other, that we respect our differences and are made better by them, in fact. It's an extraordinary experience. And once you go, as everybody has been saying, once you have that experience, you know that your hopes are realistic, and you want to have that experience again. It nourishes your spirit and assures you, and especially in troubled times, in difficult times, it's a source of soul nourishment. So we're really looking forward to being there and sharing that experience with all of you. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you, task force members. Working with you has expanded the vision of women at the Parliament in the most profound and meaningful ways. And it will continue to expand outward when we convene. And thank you, Miriam, for all your hard work, and everybody for supporting us. And I think we have time for that little video, which has big impact. So thank you all.
Goodbye and good afternoon, everybody, and hope to see you in August at McCormick Center at the Parliament convenings. And thank you for being here, everybody.
Thank you. And check your emails in the next day or so.